Hi, welcome. Please share, like, and subscribe to this growing family. Now let's dive in. How is the Israel-Hamas war affecting opinions of the United States and Arab and Muslim communities globally? In the wake of Hamas's horrific terrorist attack on innocent Israeli citizens on October 7, much of the world is aflame with anti-U.S. rhetoric, particularly Muslim and Arab communities. Many in the Middle East see a seamless connection between the actions of Israel and the United States. The Joe Biden administration's declarations that the United States has Israel's back, and its reaffirmation of the United States' ironclad commitment to Israel's security have further contributed to that perception, despite the fact that Biden has engaged robustly with a diverse array of faith communities. In general, leaders and publics have been quick and united in calls for a ceasefire and increased humanitarian aid to Gaza. Significantly, Saudi Arabia's initial official response to October 7 referred to Hamas simply as a Palestinian faction, and displayed a shocking lack of leadership about terrorism given September 11's impact on that nation. Some leaders, however, are meaningfully engaging with the United States. These include Qatar's Prime Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani, who is negotiating with Hamas to release its hostages, and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who is working with the Biden administration to send humanitarian aid into Gaza. But leaders' commitments and comments have varied depending on their country's official ties with Israel. Some signatories of the 2020 Abraham Accords, which normalized relations between Israel and several Arab nations, have taken a relatively firm public stance, including the United Arab Emirates, UAE, which called Hamas's attacks a grave escalation. Meanwhile, even though several leaders in the region are generally pro-West and have relations with Israel, their people remain strongly opposed to any diplomacy with the country and remain outraged over its military actions in Gaza. Now, many regional leaders feel an urgent need to support Palestinians, as well as try to build agency and domestic popularity. Since 9/11, many regional leaders have become increasingly aware that, as high-profile Muslims, their words reach audiences beyond their own borders. Some have taken this opportunity to offer a clear distinction between Islam and Hamas's attacks. In a speech last month, Jordanian King Abdullah II stressed, "Our religion came with a message of peace." The Pact of Omar, issued at the gates of Jerusalem almost 15 centuries ago, more than 1,000 years before the Geneva Conventions, ordered Muslim soldiers not to kill a child, a woman or an old person, not to destroy a tree, not to harm a priest, not to destroy a church. Alarmingly, the country is in a similar predicament to the post-9/11 era. The United States does not have control of the narrative nor the capacity from a messaging standpoint to deal with this fast-paced, emotionally charged moment. Amid the initial U.S. counterterrorism response to al-Qaeda's 2001 attacks, U.S. officials were similarly confused about how to allay intensifying anti-American sentiments in Arab and Muslim communities, and frustrated about having to counter al-Qaeda's claims that the West was at war with Islam. While Hamas's charter specifically calls for the destruction of Israel and eradication of Jews, the al-Qaeda narrative that the West hates Islam is foundational to the ecosystem that enables Hamas's worldview. Thus, the post-9/11 period offers lessons and a potential roadmap for U.S. policymakers to meet this moment. American leaders learned through that process that hard-to-swallow narratives coming out of Arab and Muslim communities were not only difficult to rebuff, but were entrenched across generations, genders, and geographies. The U.S. response was to create powerful White House-led initiatives and new mechanisms for civil society engagement. The United States and Iran have had a troubled relationship marred by distrust and violence for more than 40 years, and they have struggled to cooperate even when both governments recognized that they had some interests in common. Devising a better and more constructive Iran policy is important to making much-needed changes to the U.S. role in the Middle East and to preventing another unnecessary war in the future, but there is little appetite in Washington to make the effort or to take the political risks that it would require. A first step in crafting a smarter Iran policy is to understand why U.S.-Iranian relations have been so strained for such a long time and what obstacles stand in the way of changing that. Alarms about the withering of America's security umbrella perhaps rang loudest in Arab capitals after a 2019 attack on the heart of the Saudi economy prompted a reaction from Washington that was whimpering at best. The thinking was that if ex-President Donald Trump, arguably the U.S. president closest to Gulf states to date, couldn't help them, then no American administration would. The U.S. was seen as abandoning the Middle East. Blamed on Iran, the brazen pre-dawn attack on state-run oil giant Saudi Aramco's facilities knocked off half of Saudi crude output, sending oil prices climbing 19.5%, the most on record. Historically, an unwritten agreement between America and its oil-producing Arab allies stipulated that the U.S. would provide protection in return for a steady supply of crude to the global economy from a region that is home to more than two-thirds of the world's proven oil reserves. The U.S. has often leaned on the Gulf states to adjust output if the price of a barrel doesn't suit its economic interests, and Arab states have often obliged. But Arab concern about the unraveling of this arrangement has led to stubbornness when it comes to Arab oil policy, and perhaps more importantly, it has prompted some countries to address the very sources of threats to their security. The United States sees its power projection in terms of the old self-justifying frontier narrative, while Iran views the United States as the latest in a long line of foreign powers seeking to dominate them. On the other side, Iran draws on its national and religious traditions and sees itself as defying outside oppressors, while the United States perceives Iran as a terrorist threat and part of the frontier to be subdued. The two narratives interact and feed into one another, and each time there is more conflict, it reinforces the assumptions that the narratives are founded on. The United States has remained stuck in its perception of Iran's government as menacing and untrustworthy no matter what the Iranian government does, and Iran's government perceives the United States as seeking its downfall. This pattern has been formed by the countries' respective national narratives, which have served to shape how American and Iranian leaders understand their purpose in the world and how they view the other country. Opposing national narratives don't always have to prevail when two states have strong reasons to cooperate, but they limit the extent and nature of that cooperation. The United States' enemies in the region now also have more political cover for anti-U.S. actions, and since October 7th, there have been multiple attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria. The United States shot down 4 drones headed towards a U.S. destroyer in the southern Red Sea, launched from Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen, as according to U.S. intelligence reports, Iran has been accused of being deeply involved in the recent attacks on commercial ships in the Red Sea. The Houthi rebels in Yemen have been disrupting international sea trade in the region and have pushed the area to the brink of a wider conflict. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to join the family.
I think Islam hates us. There's something there there's a tremendous hatred there. There's a tremendous hatred. We have to get to the bottom of it. There is an unbelievable hatred of us.
In Islam itself?
You're going to have to figure that out, okay? There is a tremendous hatred, and we have to be very vigilant. We have to be very careful. Okay, so remember this. So listen. Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.